Welcome here to Church of the Beatitudes. Those who are physically present with us, we appreciate you having made the effort to come and actually be here with us. Those of you who are watching us online, either live or at a later time, we welcome you and are glad that you have chosen to be with us here today. This week has been quite a week. Personally, I know there are individuals within our church as well as in our community that have been experiencing a lot of difficulties. And then on top of that, we have the news that came out of Afghanistan, and that has impacted a large number of individuals, not only in Afghanistan itself, but also Americans. And so we remember all of those individuals today. And that's why it is important that we are intentional in setting aside a period of time where we can be intentional in focusing on the sacred. I mean, we may experience that in different times throughout the week, personally, but there's something about collectively coming together and actually engaging the sacred while in the presence of other people. There's an intentionality that we have here. And you will find that not only here at Church of the Beatitudes, but in many different Christian churches, as well as many other different religions. People experiencing the sacred in whatever avenue, in whatever means they have to connect with each other, and then something beyond ourselves. And so we've provided you this opportunity, and one of the greatest ways to do that is through music. Music has a way of moving us beyond the intellect and speaking to us on an emotional level that is powerful, much like art can do for us. So as we have this time together, allow yourself to be centered in this very moment, in this place, as you listen to this first song.
anthems we raise. Sing to the Lord with a song giving glory. Heaven will hear and join in our praise. Join in our praise. The Lord singing over all children. Taking delight in the anthems we sing to the Lord with a song giving glory. Heaven will hear and join in our praise. Join in our praise. The Lord singing over all children. Taking delight in the anthems we sing to the around us the sun
Hallowed be your name. 2 weeks ago, Pastor Tony introduced us to the origin story of the Lord's Prayer and how some biblical scholars theorize that Jesus never actually spoke the prayer in its entirety, but that it was more likely that each of these lines existed independently and over time were brought together to become the prayer that we know today. If so, where did these lines come from? As you listen to today's verses from the proverbial sayings found in the Bible's wisdom literature, see if you don't recognize the framework for which we understand the Lord's Prayer today. Perhaps by labeling or naming it as the Lord's Prayer, we are the ones assigning it meaning and worth as hallowed or holy. Proverbs 30:7-9. 2 things I ask of you, Lord. Do not refuse me before I die. Keep falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise, I may have too much and disown you and say, who is the Lord? Or I may become poor and steal and so dishonor the name of my God.
Hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done here on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us every debt. Forgive us every pride as we forgive those who sin against us.
into temptation. Lead us not into evil. Deliver us. Deliver us. Deliver us from evil. Deliver us from harm. Thine is the kingdom. Thine is the power and glory forever. My Father, hallowed be thy name. Amen.
Thank you. Remember the seventh day to keep it holy. Growing up, I took that verse very literally. Not only was I raised that way, but I raised my children to take that commandment, the fourth commandment, remember the seventh day to keep it holy, very literal. I remember as a child that meant that from Friday night sundown to Saturday night sundown, we kept that day special. As a child, on Friday nights, we had a special meal. And to this day, when I think about it, I have this visceral, this emotional response within me. Friday nights was waffles. Every Friday night, waffles. And that made it special. And on Saturday mornings, or the Sabbath, we had a special cereal that we could eat before we went to church. Some of you might even recall the name of it. It was called Life. That was the most sugary cereal we were allowed to have all week. I never understood it growing up, why my parents would pump us up with sugar before they sent us to church. But it made that day special. We had special clothes that we would wear to church, our Sabbath dress. We had special toys that we could play with on Sabbath. All again, those memories were established in my mind because it demarcated that day as unique. And the reason it was unique, it was because of that last word in that first line of the fourth commandment. Remember the seventh day to keep it holy. The word in both the Hebrew and the Greek has this connotation: if something is holy, that it is set apart, that it is not common, it is unique, it is different. It belongs to something that is beyond the human realm. There were objects in the ancient Hebrew religion that could be set aside for holy use. They were dedicated. They were set apart. And so it was very easy for these ancients to take this idea of holy and not only see it as a particular time and space, the Sabbath, But they could also see this day, this as holy, more than just a day. In fact, it was the essence of God himself. God was seen as being holy. This becomes quite obvious when you go into the book of Exodus. And there Moses encounters a burning bush. And this bush, the fable tells us, speaks to Moses. And it is in the voice of the divine God. And the first thing it tells him is, Moses, take off your sandals, for the ground that you are standing on is holy. It is different than the other land that is around us. This is sacred ground made holy by my very presence. So take off your shoes, Moses. And in this dialogue that takes place between Moses and God, Moses realizes something. That not only is God holy, but God's name is holy. And if it is because of that reason that the Israelis today, the Jews today, will not speak that name. Instead, they use words such as Adonai, which means my Lord. They use the word Elohim, which means God. They even use the term Hashem, which simply means in Hebrew, the name. Because the name itself was seen as being holy. You could not separate the essence of God from God's name. So again, that is such a rich foundation of the Israelite religion that continues on even today for modern Jews. There is this holiness that surrounds God and God's name. When we look at the Lord's Prayer, this sets us up to understand those first two lines as actually being very radical. We are so familiar with the Lord's Prayer that we just let those words rattle off. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And off we go. But as Janelle reminded us, there seems to be strong evidence that Jesus never spoke in its entirety the Lord's Prayer. What Jesus did do, more than likely, is pray each of those individual lines as a prayer of itself. What would often happen is you would speak a formal prayer, and at the very end, you could add on your own. But what you added on was very short. And so scholars estimate that what probably happened was each of these lines existed independently, and at a later date, they brought it together and compiled it into what we call the Lord's Prayer. But when they did this, they did something that is quite remarkable and would have been very, very troubling to the Jews around them as Christians. Look again at the first line, Father. When we take the prayer as it's found in Matthew, and it's different than the prayer in Luke, when we bring them together, we realize that more than likely there was an original version behind those two. And in the original version, the line probably at the very beginning was simply Father. And there seems to be that Jesus' followers would remember that at some point in Jesus' life here on this earth, that he spoke of God as Father. That Jesus was comfortable using that. In the Aramaic, which is the common language that Jesus and his friends would have spoken, the word meant Abba. And again, there's speculation that it is a word that we would be using today of your father, dad, daddy. It was a common word, a word that would have been heard in the majority of households. Abba. And that seems to be evidence that Jesus referred to God as Abba. Now, look at the second line. May your name be holy. Well, what is the name of God that is holy? It is the unspeakable. It is that which is not to be spoken. For to speak it would actually go against and profane God himself. So what happened is they brought these two lines together. And all of a sudden, we see something that would have been radical for them to see. Father, your name is holy. What name? Father. By creating this prayer, they were modifying the essence of what was considered to be holy. The holy is now no longer that which cannot be spoken. The holy is that which is in the common day life. One individual, in capturing the essence of this, says the following: this unexpected combination of these two lines surprised people into rethinking what was and was not holy. As a prayer, it called upon people to put God in reverence in a much broader perspective. It expanded people's vision of what was important and holy. You see, up to that point, God was seen as being distinct and set apart from the majority of common day life. Where did God dwell? God had his own house. Originally, it was called the tabernacle. That where God dwells, it was a tent. Then they decided that God would no longer be this nomadic God that traveled from here to there, and instead, God would have a permanent home. And Solomon builds the first temple. And that is where God dwells. But God doesn't dwell just in a temple. He dwells in a special place in the temple. It's called the Most Holy. And only once a year, a priest was allowed to enter into that space. And it was considered to be so holy that they would tie a rope around the priest's ankle. The priest would have bells at the bottom of their robe. And as long as those in the holy place could hear those bells, they knew everything was okay. But if for some reason the priest offended God and was struck down, they had to have a way of getting him out. And that's where the rope came in. God was seen as being distinct from the majority of the world. And by praying this prayer, these early Christians took this idea of God as being distinct and different from us and just blew it out of the water. And now God was seen as being holy, yes, but holy in a larger sense rather than just being confined. Today, we still value sacred places. The Mormons have their temples, but they have the main temple in Utah. The other Christians, we have our places of worship. And we still use the name sanctuary to refer to them as a place where God dwells. And it is in these places, not only places of worship, but places that people find out in nature. People have set apart certain places in their home to be sacred spaces. It is in these places that people encounter something that is beyond themselves, something that pulls them beyond being just human. It allows for the mystery of life to be felt in a deeper way. Even this space, when it was originally created, was designed to continually take our eyes upward. Look at the architect around you. Look at how everything points upward. All the walls, the lines are very, very straight, all pointing upward. The roof goes upward, the window goes upward. Everything is to draw our attention to the vertical, that which is beyond us. Even the pews are very much in that same straight line. But here's the temptation. The temptation is to forget the first two lines of the Lord's Prayer. Father, may that name be holy. Not the unspeakable name, but the name that is a part of common life. And what we forget sometimes is that in this prayer, we are taught that the sacred and the secular are so intertwined together that at times we cannot separate the two. That God is more than just limited to one place. The early Christians believed that God was a vast part of all different parts of life. And so the sacred is much more than that. So when we remodeled the inside of our worship center, we tried to add that element back in. We left the vertical. We didn't want to take that away because it's a vital part of calling us to something beyond ourselves. But we wanted to add a small element that would remind us that the sacred is more than just up there, that the sacred is amongst us. And one of the greatest ways to do that is circles. That's why we have these lights. These lights are to remind us that God isn't just there, that God is among us. Do you notice what they do? They bring everything back down. That's why this platform, when it was built, that's why it's in the form of a circle. That's why we now have chairs in the middle to create more this sense of a circle. So why we acknowledge that there is always supposed to be something drawing us beyond ourselves, that the sacred is also among us. And here's what's amazing, is that we may be experiencing the sacred in our day-to-day lives, and we're not even aware of it. There was a time in my life where I really emphasized what I would call God moments, those moments that I could not explain. And I realized by doing that, what I was doing is I was taking God out of just one place, but I was welcoming out into the larger world, but only where I could find God. And then I realized, as these first two lines in the Lord's Prayer teach us, is that the sacred is everywhere, even when I am not aware of it. It's in every person. It's in every relationship. It's in every experience that we have. Do you understand how radical the Lord's Prayer is? That they were able to take this idea of God and just open it up. And that's now our privilege, to be able to realize that the sacred is more than perhaps we realized it was. Now again, please understand, this doesn't mean that we stop gathering in sacred places. There is a need within humanity to be intentional, to have those moments where you truly focus in your mind on something beyond yourself. And live your life aware that it's all around you. One of the ways that we are intentional in recognizing the sacred is in prayer. Whatever you believe about prayer, it is an exercise, a spiritual exercise of becoming intentional about experiencing the sacred. And that's why here at Church of the Beatitudes, we have prayer that is spoken, and we have prayer that is silent. During this time of prayer, we're going to bring those two together. I invite you to find some place in this worship center where you can focus your eyes. For some of you, you may prefer to close your eyes. But find something where you can focus your eyes and allow your mind to be intently focused on that one object. If your thoughts begin to wander, allow your mind to come back to your breathing, because your breathing has a way of recentering you into the present moment. So let us be together for a short time of silence, followed by spoken prayer. Holy One, thank you for the insight to understand that the sacred is beyond us and also among us. And that is why we feel comfortable coming to you with prayer and voicing our frustrations. Today, we come to you with words of grief, silent frustration. We know that you value human life, that you are the source of all being. we also understand that here in this country, we are Americans, and we are holy. And we also realize that there are other human beings in Afghanistan right now that they too are holy. We know through the teachings of Jesus that justice is always on the side of the oppressed. Divine Spirit, remind us at this very moment that love is more than just words, that love is being and doing. And so as we experience the turmoil throughout our world, the turmoil within our country, and even the turmoil within our lives, may we experience again the gift of love, and then take that gift and make it real through our actions and through our words. For all these things, we give thanks and say, Amen.
Trusting all that we need flows in flowers from God. Our thirsting will be satisfied when we burn with a holy desire to fulfill everything that God requires. Making justice together, walking close to each other, reaching past all the things that divide, humbly offering kindness, seeking hope and forgiveness. We abide in God's love. We For the city shall bloom, and the earth be restored. The hurts that we bear start to heal, as the faith of the past is refreshed and reformed. The word of our God is made real. When we burn with a holy desire to fulfill everything that God requires, making justice together, walking close to each other, reaching past all the things that divide.
It has been an honor to have your presence with us, both here in person and for those of you who have been watching us online. As you go into this week, as our custom, we will share with you a blessing. And I hope that you will truly listen to this and take it to heart and then allow it to encourage you as you go throughout this week. And so may you be blessed with a sense of serenity to understand that the sacred is beyond your understanding. That's why perhaps they wouldn't speak the name of the name of God, because it was beyond our comprehension. And as much as you want to figure God out, may you find a sense of serenity, of accepting that the sacred is beyond that. But may you also be blessed with a sense of courage to be aware of the sacred that surrounds us, the courage to see the sacred in another human being, the courage to see the sacred in the dog, and yes, even in the cat, and the horses, and the trees. And why do I want to bless you with courage to see the sacred all around you? So that you will see the sacred in your enemy. I think that's why Jesus encouraged us to love our enemies. And so may you be blessed with that courage. And may you be blessed with a spirit of love. Love that can be found not only in the sacred, but it's also found in its expressions in the secular. The two are wedded together. And then may that love become so real for you that you will be able to internalize it for yourself. Because it is when you learn to love yourself that you find out what it really means to love another human being. And so go out this week and intentionally make love real for those that you come in contact with. Amen.